Hello comrades, it's TheFinnishBolshevik. Okay, now let's talk about the value form and different kinds of value forms. So what is a value form? Value form is just any way that value is expressed. So if you have a commodity, it has a value, you need to express the value somehow, well, that's what you need a value form for. The simplest way to express the value of a commodity is by the use of another commodity. For example, 1 axe equals 2 kilograms of grain. The historically earliest form of value, and also the simplest value form, is the elementary or accidental form of value. The elementary or accidental value form basically just means that in very primitive societies, there was no money, there were no established prices. Exchange was something that happened only rarely. People mostly just produced tools for themselves, produced food for themselves or their own group. They didn't really have a lot of social division of labor, so they didn't need to exchange. They didn't have a lot of surplus that they needed to get rid of somehow, and they also didn't really need to buy anything from anybody. But there could be rare instances when they happened to have a surplus and they were like, oh, well, let's exchange this for something. And then they would just meet another producer and they would exchange. And because exchange at this point wasn't really an important part of their lives, it didn't really matter if they got a fair price. They might not even know what a fair price would be. And also the stuff that they exchanged wasn't really so important. Like the other person might have like a boat or something, and they might have a bunch of grain. And they're like, well, I guess maybe I could use a boat, like it could be useful. So then they were like, okay, I guess I'll take this boat since this other guy has an extra boat. Maybe they weren't really looking for a boat, but the other person happened to have that for exchange. And the elementary value form also means that the value of a commodity is expressed only in one other commodity. So this is kind of an isolated exchange. With the rise of the first major social division of labor, which is the separation of the pastoral cattle-raising tribes from the other tribes, these pastoral cattle-raising tribes start to produce a surplus of cattle products, which they then want to exchange for products of agriculture or handicraft. And at that point, there develops the next form of value, which is the expanded form of value. The expanded form of value, or the expanded value form, means that the value of the commodity that they want to exchange is expressed in a whole bunch of different commodities. So the cattle raising tribe, let's say that they have extra cattle, like 1 sheep. The value of 1 sheep can be expressed in a whole bunch of different commodities, such as 40 kilograms of grain, 20 meters of cloth, 2 axes, or 3 grams of gold, or any other commodity. And at this point, since exchange has become a relatively regular thing, stable, constant prices are also established. So at this point, you can pretty much trust that the prices kind of make sense, that the 2 commodities that you're exchanging actually do contain roughly the same amount of labor time. How do people arrive at the conclusion that they contain the same amount of labor time? Well, simply through experience. If the other producer knows, well, hold on a minute, it takes me way longer to make 20 meters of cloth than it takes for you to produce this 1 sheep, then he's not gonna go through with the exchange. So at this point, there still isn't any kind of money. People still exchange products for other products, but it's a relatively common thing at this point. At the next stage, there develops the general form of value. And the general form of value means that some commodity starts to act as the universal equivalent. Universal equivalent is basically what we use for trade. Money is a universal equivalent. It's just a type of commodity that's used for exchanging to other commodities. So when you're dealing with the expanded form of value, maybe you have some sheepskins and then you want apples, but the other person doesn't have apples, instead he has 2 axes. So you're like, okay, I guess I'll buy these axes and then maybe I can trade them for apples. But then the guy who has apples, well, he doesn't want axes, instead he wants fish. Then you're like, well, oh crap, I guess I gotta trade my axes for fish first and then I can get the apples. That's super inconvenient. So eventually people figure out, hey, we should have a universal equivalent. such as sheep. So now everybody exchanges whatever they have into sheep, and then they can exchange sheep into whatever they want. So that's convenient. Does the universal equivalent have to be cattle? No, it doesn't. In some places it was livestock, in some places it was furs, in some places it was salt, or some other commodity. So yeah, the next value form that you get after this is the money form. So with the further growth of the productive forces, the transition to metal tools, and the rise of the second major division of labor, which is the separation of handicraft from agriculture, it led to a further development of commodity production and the widening of the market. So at this point, with the second major social division of labor, the handicraft producers, they now need to exchange. Because they don't produce enough food for themselves, they need to buy food from food producers. And the food producers, they obviously also benefit from buying tools from the handicraft producers. So at this point, exchange becomes completely necessary. And there's a growth in the amount of different commodities on the market, and it becomes more and more necessary to develop the money form. During the stage of the general form of value, there still could be several different commodities that acted as the general value form, whereas with the money form, there is now only one, which is money. Money has 5 functions. 1, it serves as the measure of value. 2, it serves as a medium of circulation. 3, as a means of accumulation, 4 as means of payment, and 5 as a worldwide currency. The fundamental function of money is that it serves as a measure of value. The textbook says that, quote, "The value of a commodity cannot be directly expressed in labor time, since under conditions in which the private commodity producers operate in isolation and separation from one another, it is impossible to determine the amount of labor which not any particular commodity producer but society as a whole expends in the production of any particular commodity. For this reason, the value of a commodity can be expressed only indirectly by the way of the equating of the commodity with money in the process of exchange." Unquote. And to fulfill the function of measure of value, money must itself be a commodity and possess value. That may seem a little unintuitive because oftentimes these days we think of money as something that is only symbolic of value, but in actual fact, money must be equally valuable as the commodities that you exchange for it. That's why paper money or electronic money or fiat currency in general are not actually money in the true sense, they're only tokens of money, but I'll talk about that later. A commodity's value expressed in money is called its price. Price is the monetary expression of the value of a commodity. So price is not the same as the exchange value of a thing. The price is the same as exchange value expressed in money. Historically, money units were based on weight in gold or silver. For instance, in Britain, the money unit is called pound sterling, and at one time it corresponded to a pound of silver. Later on, though, money units ceased to coincide with units of weight, and they became more just nominal. This occurred as a result of the importation of foreign coins, of going over from silver to gold, and especially in consequence of the debasement of coins by governments, which gradually reduced their weight. So initially, 1 pound actually weighed 1 pound in silver, but the governments realized that they can actually reduce the weight. They can keep the same nominal money amount, they can still call it a pound, but it doesn't have to weigh a full pound in silver. Or it doesn't actually have to even be full silver, it can be something else, and everything seems to function just as before. So gradually the government started to debase the money. People stopped using actual gold coins or silver coins, they started using iron money or nickel or whatever, and these days they really have nothing to do with the weight in gold anymore. The unit of money and its parts provide the standard of price. As a standard of price, money plays a completely different role from a measure of value. As a measure of value, money measures the value of other commodities, but as a standard of price, it measures the quantity of the money metal itself. The value of the money commodity varies with changes in the amount of labor socially necessary for its production. Changes in the value of gold are not reflected in its function as a standard of price. It means that however much the value of gold may change, $1 is still worth 100 times as much as a cent. The prices of different goods expressed in money, those can vary, and they do, but the actual standard of price, that 1 cent is 1/100th of a dollar, that 50 cents is half a dollar, etc., that always remains the same. Money also fulfills the function of a circulation medium. The exchange of commodities effected with the aid of money is called commodity circulation. There's two kinds of circulation. There's commodity circulation and money circulation. When a commodity passes from the hands of a seller into those of the buyer, the money passes from the hands of the buyer into those of the seller. Money's function as a circulation medium consists in its playing the part of intermediary in the circulation process of commodities. So if you want to buy bananas and you want to sell milk, instead of having to actually exchange bananas for milk, you can first exchange your bananas into money and then exchange the money into milk. At first, when commodities were exchanged, money figured directly in the form of bars of silver or gold. But this led to certain difficulties, because it was necessary to weigh the money metal, to break it up into small pieces, and you had to make sure that it was actually a legit pure gold or silver or whatever. Gradually, bars of money metal gave place to coins. That's more convenient because a coin is a piece of metal of a definite shape and definite weight and denomination. You don't have to weigh it for one. Of course, people could still forge coins, but they were still more convenient, and the minting of money was concentrated into the hands of the state. During the process of circulation, coins became worn by use, and they would lose part of their value. The practice of monetary circulation showed that worn coins could fulfill the function of circulation medium equally well as coins of full value. The reason for this was that the money, when acting as a circulation medium, plays only a fleeting role. You get it, and then you just exchange it again. You don't intend to hold on to it. It's not the same as using it as a method of accumulation or building up a treasure or something. That's different. As a rule, the seller of a commodity accepts money in exchange so that he's able to use it to buy another commodity with this money. Consequently, money acting as a circulation medium need not necessarily possess its proper value. With the emergence of money, there is another interesting phenomena. The category of the commodity splits into two, into commodities and money. In the past, they used to be one because there was only barter, direct exchange of one commodity to another commodity. But now there is also money, and this heralds the development of the contradictions of commodity production, the fact that selling and buying become separate from one another. The textbook says, when one commodity is directly exchanged for another, each transaction is of an isolated nature. Selling is not separate from buying. It is another matter when exchange is carried on by means of money, that is, when commodity circulation arises. Now exchange presupposes an all-round connection between commodity producers and a ceaseless interweaving of transactions among them. It opens up the possibility of a separation between buying and selling. A commodity producer can sell his commodity and retain for the time being the money which he receives for it. When many commodity producers sell without buying, a hold-up in the sale of commodities can come about. Thus, even simple commodity circulation contains in germ the possibility of crisis. For this possibility to be transformed into inevitability, however, a number of conditions are needed which appear only with the advance to the capitalist mode of production. So we all know what happens if people hold on to their money, which they've gotten by selling commodities, either their own labor power or other commodities, and they hold on to that money instead of spending it on other commodities. Buying and selling become separated, there's a bunch of commodities that don't get sold, there's an economic recession, and possibly crisis. And these problems get even more intricate when credit is introduced. So obviously money functions as a circulation medium and all those other things, but it also fulfills the function of means of accumulation, or as the book says, means of forming hoards. In the Finnish translation of this book, instead of saying hoard, they say treasure. So hoard is basically the same thing as a treasure. It's basically a big pile of wealth. So money is transformed into a hoard when it is withdrawn from circulation. How do you withdraw it from circulation? Well, by simply not using it. If you just put it in a vault, it stays there, it's transformed into a hoard. How do you put it back into circulation? By buying something. And as the book says, commodity producers accumulate money, for example, in order to buy means of production or as savings, and with the development of commodity production, the power of money grows, All of this gives rise to a passion for saving money, to the formation of hoards. And it further says that the function of a hoard can be fulfilled only by money of full value, gold and silver coins, bars of gold and silver, and also articles made of gold and silver. So obviously you can't set up a hoard of paper money. I mean, in a way, of course you can, but there's no guarantee that those will hold their value because they actually don't contain any value. They're just tokens that theoretically you can exchange for something that actually has value, such as commodities or gold. How does gold or silver or other precious metals, how do they adapt themselves to the needs of commodity circulation if they are used as money? Well, when the production of commodities declines and the commodity circulation shrinks, some of the gold coins disappear from circulation and are transferred into hoards. And when production extends and commodity circulation grows, these coins reappear in circulation. This happens completely spontaneously. Money figures as a means of payment in cases when the buying and selling of a commodity is carried out on credit, that is, with the payment deferred. When a commodity is bought on credit, the transfer of the commodity from the seller's hands to the buyer's is effected without immediate payment by the purchaser. When the time comes for the purchased commodity to be paid for, money is paid by the buyer to the seller without any transfer of a commodity, this having taken place earlier. It's probably pretty easy to understand why this can lead to economic crisis, because what happens if they can't pay? They've already received the commodity, and when they're requested to pay, they can't. What happens to the commodity producer who gave out all their commodities but doesn't get any payment for it? Well, I mean, you know what happens. They take losses, possibly go bankrupt. The function of money as a means of payment reflects the further development of the contradictions of commodity production. The links between the separate commodity producers become more and more extensive, and their dependence on each other increases. The buyer now becomes a debtor, and the seller is transformed into a creditor. When many commodity owners are buying commodities on credit, the failure of one or a number of debtors to honor in due time their promises to pay can react upon a whole series of obligations to pay, and lead to the bankruptcy of a number of commodity owners who are linked together by credit relationships. Thus, the possibility of crisis, which is already inherent in the function of money as a circulation medium, is intensified.